रेडियो स्पाइस होने ਸਾਰੇ ਸਰੋਤਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਮੈਂ ਨਵਤੇਜ ਰੰਧਾਵਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਰਾਤੇ ਰੋਆ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ। ਅੱਜ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਵਾਅਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਕਰਨ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਐਰਿਕਾ ਸਟੈਨਫੋਰਡ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਨਿਊਜ਼ੀਲੈਂਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਹਰ ਸਾਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਤਬਦੀਲੀਆਂ ਆਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲੀ ਵੀ, ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਰੋਲ ਅਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਤੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਮਸਲਾ ਸੀ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਐਰਿਕਾ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਬੜਾ ਅਹਿਮ ਰੋਲ ਅਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ। ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਸ਼ੱਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟ ਭਾਈਚਾਰਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦਿਲ ਜਿੱਤ ਲਿਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਨਿੱਜੀ ਤੌਰ ਉੱਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜਦੋਜਹਿਦ ਕੀਤੀ ਆ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮਸਲੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਰਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬੜਾ ਅਹਿਮ ਰੋਲ ਅਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ। ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ, ਸੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਐਰਿਕਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਲਾਈਵ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਨੇ, ਆਓ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਆਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਐਰਿਕਾ, ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ।
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Wonderful. So I guess first of all, congratulations on getting a new portfolio since we last spoke. So I'm sure you'd be chuffed about getting, apart from yourself being the education and workshop immigration, now you are associate spokesperson for ethnic communities as well. So how does it feel?
Oh, it's a huge honour, and I think it's a really great way that Christopher Luxon has structured things, because the future of our workforce is dependent on migration, but also education, and the start that we give our kids in life and preparing them for the future of work. So those two things are fantastic that they've been put together, and I'm really excited to get ethnic communities as well, working with Melissa Lee. I actually indicated to Christopher Luxon that I'd be quite keen to work in that space because of the amount of work that I've done in immigration and working with you and others in different communities all around the country. And it's just been a fantastic journey. And I'm really pleased to be able to help out Melissa, who is our spokesperson for ethnic communities.
Indeed. And Erica, I guess there been a lot of big news, current affairs when it comes to the immigration policies. And, I guess if we just go back 4 months back into time, there was a lot of uncertainty and there were a lot of people struggling from getting any pathway to, in terms of immigration. Uncertainty about how their future is going to unfold in New Zealand. And in those days, you met some, some real strugglers within our community, whether they were nurses or somebody trying to get their partner over, or, somebody who was waiting for, waiting to find out whether being a doctor, they're actually going to have any pathway to residence. How do you feel after what's unfolded up to now? What are your views about that?
Well, there's ups and downs. Obviously, the Resident 21 visa has given 165,000 people residence, or 110,000 applicants, and the path for them now is relatively straightforward, and that's a wonderful thing. But the flip side of that is that there is really a huge problem still with partnerships. So even if you are eligible for the Resident 21 visa, you still have to be able to prove living together for 12 months for your partner who may be offshore. And if you can't do that, then their part of the application gets frozen until you can prove that you've lived together for 12 months so that they can get their residency alongside you. But obviously the borders are still closed. And we've just seen the minister push out any offshore applications for visas until August next year. So what we used to do, and people who are listening will be well aware of this, if you had a partner that you couldn't prove you'd lived together with, you would apply for a general visitor visa. And your partner would come to New Zealand and you'd prove living together, and then you'd go down the partnership track. But that doesn't exist right now. So you have these thousands of people who are split from their offshore partners, wives, or husbands, and who can't be reunited. So there's a big problem there. There's actually a court case going on, or has just finished. The decision has been reserved until January, so we don't know the outcome of that. But they were arguing that it's against the Bill of Rights, and it's illegal for Immigration New Zealand to not have these partners reunited. So we'll have to wait for the outcome of that. But that's still a really big problem, in my view. We've also got, parent category, which is still nowhere near solved. We've still got the fact that there is actually no pathway to residence right now unless you can get the Residence 21, and there won't be till mid next year. So there's still a lot of issues. There's still a lot of split families who have not been prioritised in the R21, and if they can't get the R21 visa, there's still no hope on the horizon for them. So although there's been some positives, there is still a lot of work to be done.
Indeed. Within the immigration industry itself, there's been a lot of public outcry about the latest rollout in terms of the 2021 residence visa program, where there was the IT issues or, in fact, the clarity on the roadmap to even apply and what the actual terms would be. There is a lot of mixed, news coming through. So how do you see that being launched from the 1st of December?
Well, I could have told them for free exactly what was going to happen, and it did happen. When you tell 20,000 applicants who have been, let's be fair, jerked around by Immigration New Zealand for the last few years, who have no trust in immigration, who are living under anxiety and stress and have children who need to study next year, if you tell them that it's first in, first served, what's going to happen is they're all going to apply at the same time on the same day, and that's exactly what we saw. And I've been talking to some people on the inside who know about what's gone on, and basically Immigration New Zealand have not upgraded their systems or done any maintenance in 4 years. And apparently, I've yet to find this out through the OAA process, but it looks like they were warned. And then, of course, it all fell over on day one. The minister is claiming that he was promised by his officials that there would be no problem and it was all going to be okay. But I think in the background, the IT companies that they work with were quietly warning them this is going to be a problem, and it was. And so we're just trying to find out the cost, because they had IT workers working around the clock for days and days and days. And I think it's going to be, it's going to go up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars that it would have cost them to patch it up. And I don't know whether or not it's in a state that is going to be okay for those 90,000 people on the 1st of March next year who are going to be applying. But to your other point, you mentioned that, that they told us at the beginning what kind of information that you would need to apply, and they seem to be changing the rules a bit. I note they're asking for some different security documentation, especially from people from China, and that was never indicated, and that piece of information could take 6+ months to get. So there are going to be a lot of applicants who thought they'd get their applications through quite quickly, who might find that it is actually going to take much longer, and that was never indicated at the beginning. So a few little things are starting to pop up where immigration officials are now asking for different things that they didn't indicate.
Indeed. I guess just staying with that, Erica, there is a lot of talk of, the number of applications Immigration New Zealand will have on their table, and the number of staff that will be expected to, I guess, process those, and there seems to be a huge gap. What are your views about that?
Well, my views are that every single piece of resource that they possibly have has been put onto this R21 visa. And they're doing that because, look, the minister's reputation is on the line. He's put his neck on the line on this R21 visa. It has to go well, because this is his big thing. This is really the only thing he's done in immigration. And so his reputation's on the line. So he's got every available resource working on it. So he would have been pretty upset that the IT system fell over in the first week. They were only able to process 20 of those visas. They need to do 1,700 a week to make sure they're on track for 80% in 12 months, which is what he's promised. But my big problem is there's probably not enough resource, you're right. But the issue that I've got is that they've taken every available resource and put it into the R21 visa. And you've got people who are still sitting in the work to residence and SMC queue with their paper-based applications. And there's basically no one doing that work. So they're stuck in a queue that was already going nowhere, that's still going nowhere because there's no staff to do that. The other big issue, and this is the big thing, is that they are unable to process work visas. So they don't have enough staff to process those critical purpose visas of people trying to get in the country to undertake, if you're a nurse or an IT specialist or someone who's allowed to come in the country. And this is the big thing. The most important thing right now for business is we cannot get enough skilled workers. The number one concern across all sectors, all regions, is skills shortage. So when the Prime Minister said that from the 30th of April next year, we'd be able to invite foreigners into New Zealand, everybody thought that meant workers, but it didn't, because Minister Farfoy has actually pushed out the ability to apply for a work visa or any type of visa if you're offshore until August next year. Now, there's two reasons for that. One, he doesn't have any staff to process them because they're all doing R21. So right now, our economy is being strangled because Immigration New Zealand doesn't have enough staff to process work visas of people offshore. So that's the first thing. The second thing is he's got this new visa type, the employer accredited work visa, which he wants all workers to go on, which doesn't open until July next year. So that's another reason why he doesn't want any workers coming in before July, because he doesn't want them going on old visa types. So there's a bit going on that just indicates Immigration New Zealand are not up to scratch, and our economy is being held back because of that underperforming department and that underperforming minister.
Yep. Erica, there is a large pool of overseas stuck, offshore migrants who in fact are ready to just jump on the next plane and make it back here. But there is no, I guess, clear roadmap for them. And I'll tell you, just before this interview, everybody from overseas I know who's stuck. The moment they got to know that I'm interviewing you, that was the question they had. What about us? What do you think should happen, and what are her views about that? So I guess I need to ask you that directly.
Yeah, well, look, our view has always been, and it's in our COVID response, is that if you are from a country that is not a high-risk country, and that you are able to show that you are COVID-free via a test and you've been double vaccinated, then you should have the ability to come back to New Zealand. And that's what we put out in our COVID response document. It's all there. So if you have a valid visa, then if you are COVID-free, have a double vaccination, you should be able to come back to New Zealand to fulfill your work visa that you're in. And the important thing to note is that Australia are actively going out there and quite aggressively focusing on students and migrant workers. As of 2 days ago, their borders are open for those people, and ours remain firmly closed until at least August next year. They could push it out again, we don't know. And they're ignoring these offshore stuck people who have valid visas, who can't get back in, who have their whole lives here. Some of them still have cars, possessions, apartments, and who've built a life here, who can't get back in. So that's our position.
Indeed. And I guess there is a particular category, the board exemption for highly skilled, in demand, your teachers, and you hold a portfolio for that as well. But nothing materialized in terms of the numbers kind of, coming through. How do you view that? Yeah.
Well, again, it's one of these things that the government does where they announce something and it sounds like they're solving a problem, but the devil is in the detail. And when you announce that we're going to have 300 teachers or 200 dairy workers or 5 port workers, you actually got to go and follow up and see what happened. And you can see that in 6 months, no teachers have entered the country. 3 out of the 200 dairy workers, none of the port workers, 11 out of 50 shearers, 6 out of 60 vets. So it's a failed policy. These people can't get in the country for a number of reasons. Mostly it's MIQ. They don't put aside any spots for them, so they're competing with everyone else in the misery of the lottery that is MIQ. But also, this government have started to become very interventionist with immigration. So what they seem to be doing is taking a sector by sector approach, a very, very structured approach where they go to the sector and say, right, you can have 50 workers. You might need 1,000, but we'll give you 50, and they must be paid this much. And so they're sort of picking winners, or whoever yells at them the loudest. And I tell you what, the seafood industry yelled at them the loudest. They've just had brokered a deal where they're allowed to bring in as many workers as they like, and they don't have to fulfill a workforce test. So if you're an industry who's got a strong lobby body, you can go to the minister and get an allocation of workers. I mean, this is from, it sounds like it's something from decades ago, doesn't it? Where the government decides how many workers can come in at what price, but it's far less than we need, and it's not in all the sectors that we need. And I can tell you that Australia are actually moving away from that approach, away from a very highly regulated sector by sector approach, more to a market driven approach, which is what we used to have, but we're now moving away from, which this government are trying to meddle. But the problem is when they meddle, we don't get the results. So they're meddling and being highly interventionist, but in the end, we're not getting the workers in the country.
Indeed. Erica, I guess there is a particular category which is starting to make a lot of noise. Doctors in particular, seem to be, hard done with what's really happening, especially from the migrant community. I was actually part of a community meeting yesterday where they feel that just getting through the system and trying to get them into the pipeline, that's a huge challenge at the moment. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, it's something we've been working on, and my colleague and neighbour actually, Simon Watts in North Shore electorate, has been working on this. And you're absolutely right. If you are a foreign doctor who comes here and you don't have a qualification from a similar country, Royal Schools, I think it is, so like Australia or the UK, then you have to go through a different process here, and that process is very difficult to go through. There aren't very many spots available. The house officer jobs aren't there, which you need to have in order to get registered. So we're working on a solution whereby more of those spots are funded by the government, so we can push more doctors through the system. Because as you rightly point out, we've got hundreds of doctors who are sitting here onshore who could at least even just be vaccinating people. They can't even vaccinate people. So, and all we need to do is just push them through the system, and it requires funding.
Indeed. Erica, I mean, there seem to be, I guess, underlying tone within the migrant community that this government seems to be doing everything to put, I guess, all sorts of challenges in front of them, just trying to kind of come into the country, settle into the country, trying to find a job, trying to, get through very tough times, where, as you said earlier on, the families are very much, stuck between the rock and the hard place. Either they pack up the bags and shoot back, or in fact just sit through and wait for the offshore stuck partner to come through, or so forth. I mean, it seemed to be, a drawn out process. If you were, say, in in charge, how differently you would do this?
Oh, there's so much to do. I mean, Immigration New Zealand, for a start, I think. I mean, there are a lot of good people that work there, and I'm not blaming them, but I think that the whole department needs a shift in focus away from being the gatekeeper to a facilitator. We are going to rely on migrants more and more in the future, and we need a system that, just as you said, doesn't put roadblocks in the way and cause people so much stress and angst that they leave. But we also need a minister, and if I were the minister, there are so many obvious things that make sense. Like, for example, with some of these partners, we've got doctors and nurses leaving New Zealand to spend however many months that immigration deem necessary to prove their relationship with their partner. In the end, do we want doctors and nurses here on the ground working, or do we want them heading back to whichever country they're from to prove a relationship? Well, on balance, we want them here. We should have been issuing visitor visas, critical purpose visitor visas for their partners to come here. And look, to be with them so that they didn't leave. And you can take a sector by sector approach with that and start with your critical health workers and work your way through. But I mean, when you look back at this year, earlier this year, where we had 9,000 MIQ rooms go begging, we could have reunited all of the migrant families, and a huge portion of those split with their partners as well. But we just chose not to. And that was before Delta. We had options and we didn't do anything about it. And so now we're in a position where, we're needing MIQ for the Delta outbreak. And so it's a lot more difficult to facilitate. So I think that we just need a minister who's a lot more nimble and who can see, right, we saw last year that at this period of time we had some space in MIQ. We're going to reunite some of these families, because the reality is, as you've said, they're leaving. And we don't want them to leave. We need them here. But like I say, there needs to be a big focus on immigration, away from a gatekeeper and more to a facilitator.
Indeed. Okay, I guess out of all of this one-off residents, a blanket, there were a few groups that kind of missed out on this, and PhD students would be one of them, who actually are really crying out foul. It just seems like they did everything right by the book, and not only they were paying and didn't want to actually, in fact, be I guess, burden on the system. A lot of them actually decided to carry on with their study when they couldn't actually get any clarity on pathway to residence, which they had applied for earlier on. But now they actually very much with no hope to, I guess, getting any clarity on whether there is going to be something coming on their table. What are your views about that?
Well, they're in the same position as anyone else who wasn't eligible for the R21 visa. There is no pathway to residence right now. We don't know what the criteria will be in June next year. We don't know how many points you'll need, how much money you'll need to earn. So there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, personally, I think the PhD students are going to be fine. They will have enough points because they're exceptionally talented people who have very high qualifications and earn a significant amount of money. I think that there won't be a problem for them come June. But the problem is that I just believe that, but I don't know it, because there is no criteria. And so I totally get from their perspective, they've come to this country. They are pretty amazingly talented people who are undertaking some pretty incredible research, because I've been talking to them. They are exactly the kind of people we want to stay here. I don't understand why he didn't include PhD students in the R21 visa. Of all of the students, I mean, and we do want most of them to stay, but the PhD students, they're the ones who create employment and jobs and innovation. They're the people we want to stay, and I don't understand why he hasn't included them. I have tried to get a story up about them. You've got to remember that New Zealanders actually fund them to be here. They study at domestic rates. So every year we fork out $50 million in paying most of their fees for them to be here. So not only do we desperately want them, but we've invested in them to a huge amount. And even government departments like MFAT, for example, spend about $20 million a year funding these PhD students. So we invest in them. Why would we not want them to stay? We should have given them the option to apply for the Resident 21 visa. And I'm trying desperately to get a story up in the news about that, to try and put pressure on the minister to change his mind on that one.
Indeed, and there are a few questions coming through. Student visa, for the offshore, there are a lot of, I guess, aspirants who want to get that clarity. How do you see it?
I actually had one who contacted me this morning, and there are a number of offshore students who have not been able to complete their courses that they've paid for. So, they've entered in good faith into a contract, they've paid their money, and they've been shut out. The minister really needs to take a look at those categories of students and start figuring out, for the ones who weren't able to complete their course offshore online, who do need to come back to be in class, he needs to work out who they are, how many of them there are, and whether or not he needs to extend their visas to allow them to get back once the borders reopen.
Okay. I guess now I just wanted to talk about your new portfolio, Erica, in terms of the associate spokesperson for ethnic communities. I guess, what would be the priorities for you in that, and you know, in terms of the roadmap into 2023 elections, you know, there are a lot of prioritized, I guess, you know, key challenges which are outlined on the page itself. How do you see it yourself? What do you think are the key challenges at the moment?
Well, I've only just landed in this position in the last, I've only been given the new portfolio in the last few days. And I actually, Melissa Lee and I have yet to sit down because I've been so inundated with the education portfolio. I haven't actually sat down with Melissa, but she said to me, right, we're going to work really closely. You and I are going to sit down and create some plans because there's a lot of work to be done. She has to do it all on her own. She travels the country. She goes to all the events. And so the two of us need to sit down and create a bit of a plan. Look, the way that I see it from, and I've only seen it from my immigration lens so far, what some of the issues are in the sector. And I look at things like, you know, exploitation, you know, and a fair degree of sort of xenophobia and racism that is experienced by the community. And you know, just a general, you know, we're a multicultural society, but it doesn't always play out like that. So there's a fair amount of work to be done there. But as I say, at the moment, I need to sit down with Melissa and she's going to start introducing me to all of the different communities. And so I can get a really good understanding of the issues, because at this point in time, I've only seen it through my immigration lens, and there are a lot of problems from the immigration side, but I'm expecting from the other side as well that there'll be a lot of things that we need to have good policy on. And I think a big thing for us also, as you know, is that, you know, we need to reflect that in our own party. We got decimated at the last election and we lost so many of our ethnic MPs. And so we need to build that back. And so, you know, we need to look like a party that reflects New Zealand. And at this point in time, you know, we really don't. And so we'll be on the hunt for some really good candidates as well, so that we can build that capacity back.
Indeed. Erica, it's always a pleasure talking to you, I guess, and we need to save some fuel for the next catch up, which is going to be on a monthly basis. So we will be doing this, I guess, from next month on a regular basis. So there will be opportunity for, I guess, our viewers, listeners, and for the wider community to voice their concerns, their, I guess, opinion as well. At the end, have a fantastic Christmas. You deserve it. You've been at it, you know, and so many people have said this to me, that make sure you tell her that we all see you in a very good light. You've been there for them, and they I guess wanted you to keep on doing what you are doing. This is something I hear all the time from you know, the average folks who were very much you know, affected by this, and now see a light at the end of the tunnel. So very Merry Christmas to you and the family. I'm sure you'll be taking time off to spend some quality time with your loved ones.
It will be a little bit. Well, Merry Christmas to you, and also to all your viewers as well. Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you next month.
Thank you, Eric.